you will have to change flashers as far as that goes. But again, that's a minor item.
And it's got to be negative ground only, from what I read.
Yeah, I would imagine it would have to be because LEDs are polarity sensitive.
Although that guy in Texas makes positive ground.
Yeah, you just
His turn
build it the other way.
That place makes offers you either. Mike, what about the draw of the halogen lamps?
Like I said, halogen right out of the box. I can buy a seal beam halogen that is 5560, and the replaceable H4 lamp. I don't have that data. Comes in many different varieties, up to 100. So it's like 65, 100, 65, 80. I think those are like the general groupings. There's a company nearby here.
At what point are you going to be going to relays?
I would expect if you went over 85 on high beam, you probably would go with the relays. Also, one drawback with the H4 lamp, just to finish it up, as you go to the higher wattages, their operational life becomes less. So for the 100-watt lamp, they're making noises about 500 hours. But when you consider that that's high beam, and they're only on for a moment, or, a minute or two at a time, that 500 hours can still last you a couple of years. Okay, tires. Most of our cars came out of the factory originally with bi-ply tires, or a very simple radial tire, cheap little OEM tire. They tended to be kind of skinny. Bi-ply tires certainly didn't have the grip of a modern radial. And now today, bi-splies are certainly limited availability, mostly for the electric car market. You certainly couldn't go down to NTB and buy a set of bi-spli tires if the guy even knew what you were talking about. So you can upgrade with either a radial bi-spli look-alike. So I can get it looks like a bi-spli tire, it has that nice square shoulder on it, but it's actually radial construction. Or I can just upgrade to a modern radial tire. And you play around with the aspect ratios a little bit. You can get a tire that has about the same height as the one that came off the car, but a little more section width gets you a little more grip. As with any radial, improvements in handling, improvements in ride, and generally they also come with a higher speed range and generally a mileage improvement as well. As a note, I don't know what's changed in the tire manufacturing industry in the last two decades, but they strongly recommend you replace a set of tires every 10 years, whether you use them or not. So if you buy a new tire today, number one, it's going to have a date code on it when the day it was born, or it'll be month and year it was born, stamped on one sidewall. And if you buy a new set of tires, maybe you might want to check on that to make sure they didn't tell you something that's been sitting in the rafters for 6 years. But they always do recommend to get rid of them in 10 years because they certainly dry out, but I guess there's something to do with the materials they use in the tire. They just simply break down with age. Okay, brakes. For standard duty, for street duty, a standard set of brakes is going to get the job done. As long as everything is up to speed, you got a decent set of pads, the hoses are all in good shape, the rotors are clean and running true. The standard out of the factory brakes will get the job done. But certainly there's always some room for improvements, and with the way brakes work in modern cars today, it'd be terrible if the Honda Accord in front of you became your backstop. You ran into it trying to stop. So anything you can do to improve the brakes certainly will work better. Original pads can tend to be a little bit dusty. They're made for a general work. So if you're being particularly aggressive on a back road, you might find pretty quickly that your brakes are starting to fade. And brakes fade because they start to overheat. What actually happens is they're outgassing a superheated gas, which creates a very thin layer, only a few molecules thick, of superheated air between the pad and the rotor. So the rotor doesn't actually get hit with the pad. You have a thin layer of air that's preventing that happening. So that's why the brake pedal still feels hard, but the car doesn't want to slow down. So modern brakes or an upgraded set of brakes would use something like a pad that can tolerate a higher heat range. And you can go to rotors that are vented, cross-drilled, and slotted. And the idea of the venting, obviously, is to get the heat out. The cross-drilling and slotting lets the superheated gases get out of the way, so they've got a path to push away, and now the pad can come down and get to the rotor. You can also get upgraded brake pads. EBC is one of them. They make, there's green stuff, red stuff, yellow stuff, and there might be one more. But as you keep going up, the cost increases in a similar fashion. And you might end up with a brake that doesn't work very well when it's cold. So out of the box, the EBC green stuff is slightly better than stock. I had a set on my Mini hoping to get some real brakes on the Mini, and it turned out they didn't perform quite the way I was expecting. It was slightly better than stock, but that was about it. EBC red stuff is advertised as a 25% improvement in braking efficiency. So if you went up to that color, you might notice some improvement in braking. Beyond that, you can go to the Willwood brakes, which are 2 or 4 slot, or 4 piston calipers rather. And you can always upgrade hoses to a stainless steel braid. The idea there is that it reduces the flexing. The hose tends to bulge when you push on the pedal and put pressure in the system. The stainless steel braiding prevents that doing that, keeps it nice firm pedal. Steering. Certainly cars like the TR3 have a fairly complicated steering mechanism. There's all kinds of drag links and connections and idlers and pivot points, all given to service issues. They seize with age. I don't know how many cars we've changed parts on that where turning the wheel this can't be that stiff. The car is almost undrivable. And you take it apart and you find there's an idler there that had never been lubricated and it's just about frozen solid. Newer cars obviously use rack and pinion steering, which reduces the amount of parts that you're dealing with, and they're a little bit simpler setup. Some of the upgrades that we actually had an inquiry a couple of weeks ago about fitting power steering with TR3. So we figured, well, I mean, we thought about the problem. It's like, well, all you need is a rack that would fit within the space, and all the other parts you just bolt on. So once you figured out the configuration, you could get the parts you needed. It would actually work pretty well. As long as the customer was willing to pay for the engineering, which would take to get it all sorted out, it could be done.
Hey Mike, somebody already did that. They already engineered it.
Oh, great. Okay, keep that in mind, Matt.
Is
You can
that
buy it ready
A
to
power
go.
rack for a 3.
oh, TR3 electric steering?
Yeah,
Oh,
power
it's
steering.
electric. I'm not sure it's electric, but it's rack and pinion.
Hydraulic.
Oh yeah, they've been selling a TR3 conversion for a long time now.
Okay, but you want it electric. Is that
The
what you're-
customer wants electric.
Okay.
Let's
Anyway.
separate.
I got an answer for that.
Okay.
Called
Anyway.
Audi.
Okay, anyway, you can make some improvements to that. If you just want to upgrade it, there obviously are a rack and pinion kit you can fit into a TR3. We've seen a few of them here. And and beyond that, you can go to a quicker ratio for like a TR6, for example. Also, a smaller steering wheel might give you a little bit more feel. The early cars, 70, 71, 72, all had a big 15-inch black wheel. But if you went to the wheel that came in 74, 75, it was 1 inch smaller, a little bit more section to get a hold of, and a tad more comfortable. And that's an upgrade you can make, and nobody would ever know that you even did it. Okay, suspension. Standard are rubber bushings. Problem with these is they're very compliant. Also, the problem with these is they do this. They wear out. They break, they dry out, they crack, they fall apart. These actually are the upper control arms on a TR6, which are the upper inner A-arm connections. And when these wear out, then that lets that arm move back and forth, which causes the car to kind of do this down the road, kind of wanders around like a drunken sailor. So these become an issue with age. In addition, most of the cars came with a lever shock. And they are rebuildable, but I don't think anybody knows that you can put oil in them and do a few other things, but eventually the seals in there just wear out. And at some point, you have to deal with it either by rebuilding it or replacing it with something else. So some of the really good upgrades for suspension are polyurethane parts. They don't crack, they don't dry out. They still wear, I guess in extreme cases, but they press it in the original places. They're far less compliant, so the car doesn't kind of steer itself because all these little bushings are able to wiggle around, and so it keeps the suspension parts where they belong. The car goes where you point it. There's a slight penalty, I'm sure, in ride quality, but I don't somehow think you'd actually notice it.
Mike, excuse me, quick question.
Yeah.
With the polyurethane bushings, do you recommend lubing them?
Yes.
Okay.
I think the manufacturers recommend that, and I think you use a lithium grease because they, either way, once you put them together, you've still got some metal parts inside of metal parts, and you don't want them all rusting together because then they'll make some strange noises.
Okay. Thanks.
And I think it also does help the assembly as well. Continuing, as far as shock absorbers, I can replace that with tube shock conversion kits. There are plenty of those available. Once I go to a tube shock, then that allows me to use a standard old shock or upgrade to like an adjustable, like a Coney or a Spax. So it opens up a lot of different avenues for making improvements in ride quality.
Excuse me, how difficult is that on the TR3 on the rear? Because where the shock is located.
That might be above my pay grade. I don't know if I have a good answer for that, but I can probably find out. How's that? Okay. And finally, in the suspension and handling department, you can certainly always upgrade to a thicker anti-roll bar or adding an anti-roll bar. You add a thicker, the idea of the anti-roll bar is it does, as its name implies, it prevents the car from leaning into a turn because of the torque you're applying to the bar is trying to resist that torque, and that keeps the car flat. Some cars only came with a front bar. Some cars originally had two bars, like the MGB came with had a rear bar, but they took it off as part of trying to get the car emission in '75, and I don't think it ever came back after that.
Yeah, they put it back on.
Did they?
77.
Yeah, well, things were coming to an end at that
Because it
point.
kept going like this.
Yeah. But you add a thicker bar at one end, that does improve the roll stiffness, helps the car corner flatter. Okay, cooling. Standard systems in pretty much any car, for the most part, are adequate. But you will find that if you're sitting in traffic on a hot day and you're watching the temperature gauge and traffic isn't moving, the temperature gauge just wants to inch up. I know in my youth I spent a lot of days in traffic in 80-degree weather with the windows open, the heater going full blast, just trying to keep the temperature gauge from going up there. Because I was sure bad things were going to happen when it did that. The other issue is that the older systems, depending on how well they've been maintained, can be full of all kinds of stuff. Rust, silt, corrosion products, old antifreeze, you name it, it can be in there. So certainly some of these old cooling systems could definitely benefit from an upgrade. So first off, one of the obvious ones is an aluminum radiator. Now, as part of putting this talk together, I did a little bit of research and I wanted to know why everybody touts aluminum as the way to go. As it turns out, if you looked at the coefficient of thermal conductivity, brass is the lowest. And they use brass in a lot of tanks and so on. Aluminum is about in the middle, and copper is the best. Now, so if brass was 100, aluminum is 200, but copper was 400. But the idea is if I had a copper tank to be as strong as an aluminum tank, the copper tank would be twice as thick. So now I'm kind of going the wrong way as far as getting rid of heat. But also aluminum is a fairly cheap material. It's very easy to work with, and it's light. So that's probably the big thing when it comes to an aluminum radiator. But usually these kits do provide more capacity. As big a radiator as you get into the space, and the more capacity, the more coolant I have to work with, the more coolant I have to carry the heat off, and the more surface area I have to get rid of that. So aluminum radiator actually has quite a bit going for it. I found mine in Summit Racing. I didn't have to go all over, but I found, certain things can be found in Summit Racing. And if you do a little bit of shopping, you can find what you're looking for in kind of strange places. Secondly,
Hey, Mike, while you're talking about that,
yeah,
we just did just food for thought. We, a couple of weeks ago, we just put that waterless antifreeze in a customer's TR6. And I don't have any feedback on it yet. It's, we rebuilt the engine, so the engine was totally dry, but we put the waterless in there. It was expensive. Seems to have worked. I don't have any feedback from the customer yet after we delivered the car, so I'm still waiting to hear back, but, that's how expensive. I think it's like $40 a gallon, $45.
And it only takes 2 gallons.
Well, that's true, thank God. You're not doing the tractor trailers.
But
But, yeah, but it seems to work well, but here again, I don't have a track record.
Man,
Yeah,
what's the
so-
pros and cons of that? What are you gaining by doing that?
It's supposed to actually keep it cooler.
I think it
There's no
boils
conversion.
350.
as opposed to
So,
it's more like 200.
So
I've used the water wetter in my PPR one time, it made a huge difference.
water weather, yeah.
There's no difference.
Yeah, the only thing doing with that is playing with surface tension of the water.
Evans waterless coolant is interesting because if your car went to 200 degrees or 220, you're not going to lose any out the overflow. It's not boiling, you're not creating those
Vapor
bubbles
pockets, right.
and the hot spots, right, anything like that. So you could watch your temperature gauge go way high in traffic and know you're not losing any. And I think
That's the
the
trick.
engine components don't care very much.
Yeah, they don't care
If
what you
they're
do.
300 degrees.
Right.
You just don't want to lose water at 212.
Right, well, that's the idea of going to a higher pressure cap, is you reduce those hot spots. You keep those hot spots.
The Evans is zero pressure.
I'm sorry?
The Evans coolant has a zero pressure system.
Okay, right,
Which
right.
is kind of nice.
It doesn't flash the
But those
steam.
old heater hoses, with a dashboard aren't running 12 or 14 pounds.
Right.
Trying to keep the water heating down.
It's more of a case probably of the heater core than it is the hose.
Okay.
Because the hose, you'll get a little bit of expansion of the
Okay.
hose.
But the old core.
But the cores are
I
just
would
hard.
recommend every 2 years.
Now, the question is, for me, is
Cars
how
aren't big,
dry
big,
does it have to be
but I still get the coolant.
to change it over?
My
Well,
stag
to
out
me,
there
it would be very difficult to take a normal car
Get it.
and put waterless in it, because they specify that in the directions.
How the hell do you get all the water?
Yeah,
Big drum right outside.
gotta get the car dry.
Just save it. Bring it here.
Where's our antifreeze coming to the picture? No more use of antifreeze?
That's right.
It's done.
Because the freezing temperature is it's some glycol, it's some sort of oil.
Okay, here we go. As far as cooling system upgrades otherwise, hoses. Hoses dry out, they crack, they stretch. The reinforcing inside of it breaks. Now you buy hoses that are Kevlar reinforced. In theory, they should last about forever.
I don't think the rubber is the same as it was back in the day.
No, I don't think it is either. Something's changed, but I don't know what. Also, electric fans, these are great. They come in any kind of size, and they will move air like you won't believe. 2,200 cubic feet per minute, 3,000 cubic feet per minute. Depends on how much current you want to make available to that fan to drive, but you can cool off a really big engine real quick with a couple of those. In addition to thermostatic controllers, I would recommend one that's adjustable. So a little screw slot right in here, and normally there'd be a plug over top of that. But I can turn it and decide where on the temperature gauge do I want that fan to kick on. It just is a great way to buy a little security. Also, improve the airflow through the radiator. There's a green 250 in the other room that's got all kinds of ductwork in it, all kinds of